your host, Krysta Gibson. I'm also the publisher of NewSpiritJournal.com. Now, Keeping It Real is about exactly that. It's about practical spirituality. It's about grounding the things that you know and that you learn and that you practice into your everyday life. So getting off the yoga mat, off the meditation mat, into your car, onto the bus, walking down the road, whatever you're doing, this show is about making your spirituality practical, keeping it real. I have a delightful guest today. His name is Kevin Hart. Not the comedian, no, it's a different Kevin Hart. And Kevin he was an addict, a drug addict and an alcoholic, and he found his way to sobriety, and he tells this story in his book called 1,000 Screaming Monkeys. I love that title. And today he's going to talk to us about his addiction, kind of what his history with the addiction is, and how he transformed himself or worked with the transformational process to come out on the other side of it. And then he and I are going to talk about addiction, and we're going to talk about what are some things you can do to use your addiction as a spiritual journey. So join me now as we visit with Kevin Hart. Hi, Kevin. Welcome to Keeping It Real. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you. Hello. It's good to be here.
So tell us all about your addiction. Kind of what is your story? I know that you've written a whole book, and I know you could talk for hours, but let's get the Reader's Digest version of your story, of what happened.
The Cliff Notes of my life.
That's right. Cliff Notes. That's great.
Well, it's really good to be here, and I want to thank you for asking me to be on your show. And I so appreciate this opportunity to share about, addiction especially. I know that a lot of times we think about addiction, we just think about drugs or alcohol or some of that kind of stuff like that, but we can be addicted to so much stuff. In fact, I heard you one time say that you were addicted to breathing.
Yes, I was also addicted to cigarettes, and because I was addicted to breathing, that helped me quit cigarettes years ago, but yes.
Yes, very nice. So, I think it's so strange that we can live entirely different lives in the same human body. And that's what happened for me. So I'll tell you a little bit. I'll take a few minutes and try to explain to you how my life was before.
Sure, that'd be great.
I would have never been on your TV show before.
Right. Yes, I'm sure.
I was living in a very dark world of addiction and just, immense loneliness inside. And of course, I didn't know any of that at the time. I thought that life was just life and that the main objective was to get more stuff. Mm-hmm. And I misunderstood Jesus' golden rule back then. I thought it was do unto others before they do unto you.
Oops.
Well, it's just kind of the world I was raised in, and I don't know where that came from. I just had this impending feeling that, I needed to lie and cheat and manipulate to get what I thought I needed to be okay. But at that time, I didn't realize that was just basic survival. Mm. And that really I was living, in what we call the root chakra, or the lowest vibration available to us. I was living way back in the caves of my own consciousness. And I've come to learn since then that consciousness is actually the container in which we live. That the world that I live in is a reflection of the way that I think about life and the world. And if you would have told me that back when I was 38 years old, when I went sliding face first into a treatment center, I would have thought you were insane. Mm-hmm. But I think it's exactly the opposite, because I was insane back then. Right. And I just didn't know that I could change my thoughts and change my world.
So what were you addicted to, just so people kind of know?
Well, I like to call myself a garden variety addict.
Uh-huh.
Want to know what my favorite drug was?
Yes.
What do you got?
Uh-huh.
In other words, whatever would take me out of my mind, I would like more of.
Yeah.
I'm the kind of guy that would find a pill in the couch and just swallow it, hoping that it would produce some kind of euphoria.
Uh-huh.
And so, but really, I've been an alcoholic since day one, and just love smoking pot, and I got into cocaine, and I never did get into needles. But I, did every kind of drug there really is. Opiates was a huge thing, and the combination of opiates with alcohol was absolutely euphoric, but then you paid the price when you came down, and it was absolutely devastating.
Exactly.
And so I know that opiates is a huge thing right now. And, the pain medication that we have today is a derivative of opium, which is heroin and those kind of drugs. And now they're making heroin that's so powerful. Thank God I've been sober 10 years, because who knows what would have happened. And I'm seeing people dying at a rate faster than I ever saw.
Right.
And it's, I'm involved in the recovery community, so I see it consistently that people are actually dying from this in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
And that, and before, when I was what we call running and gunning and on the streets just trying to get high again, I didn't see as much of it, but I saw people going down left and right, going to jail and getting sentenced to long terms in prison and all kinds of stuff. And I just thought that I was going to avoid all that. I just wanted to get high once more, just one more time. Right. If I could just get one more, this will be the time where I reach that pinnacle that I'll never have to worry again. Right. And it was always one more lower when I came down. And so, but, it's funny because we talk about needles and there's a lot of people injecting heroin right now. And they told me, I said, well, I haven't done any of that when I first came around. I said, I haven't done that. And they said, yet. I thought, yet. And they said, yeah, yet is an acronym. And I said, it is? And they said, yeah, it stands for you're eligible too.
Good one. I haven't heard that one. That's very good.
Yeah. And it's like, so anything that I see other people doing, I'm eligible for that.
Right.
That is a potential for me. And that's really bad when people are dying and going to prison and beating up their spouses and all kinds of stuff. But what if you're eligible too for a greater life beyond your wildest dreams?
Exactly.
I heard a gal talking the other day about that, about, with my fear, I'm always like, oh, what if this and what if that? And what if I don't make it? And what if this happens? And she said, but what if it's awesome?
Right.
And what if I could live a life beyond my wildest dreams?
Right.
So rewind back to when I was, 36 and 37 and 38, where my addiction hit a massive high, where I could not sustain my life anymore. And every day was just the drudgery of finding drugs and getting loaded and trying to just stay away from the cops and living that life on the streets. And, I did not know that another life was available to me in that moment. And that it just required a surrender, a different way of thinking about the world. And so everybody tried. My whole family tried. I wasn't exposed to anybody in recovery because I wouldn't go around those circles. Why would I? I was hanging out in bars and drug houses and that kind of stuff. And so I remember even one time my brother came to the place the place of business that I had. I'm self-employed, always have been. And I had this big shop where I was working. And he came there and he said, I was 80 pounds underweight and just not eating and just locked in the attic doing drugs. And he somehow got in there and I couldn't stand being seen by people.
Right.
And I said, what are you doing here? And he said, I don't want to see my brother in a coffin. And all I could do was give him the middle finger and tell him to leave me alone, And he came and really wanted to help me. And I couldn't see in myself that there was any other way, because like we find out, there comes a point in addiction where I can't use anymore and I can't not use.
Right. Right.
And how it's just soul bending. You get that impending loneliness that I talked about. Right. And so you push everybody and everything away, but you're really asking them, come close, I need help. Right. But we can't reconcile the two until the great surrender. And so for me, it was really jail that did it. I remember, I don't know if you've ever been in a jail, but there's a thing called a sally port. And the sally port is what goes between the hallways in the jail and the place the inmates stay. Right. Yeah. There's these big steel doors, and when they close, it's with a giant clang. Yes. And it's concrete and steel, and the guards there, and and their other inmates, and I fell to the floor and just a weeping, sobbing pile of a broken man, and I just begged for help, but I wasn't talking to that guard or to the other guys. I didn't care what they thought of me in that moment. Something that I always cared about what other people thought above all else. This time I just didn't care. I said, please help me. And something came and helped me. And that story's in my book because it was so important to me in my life. Right, right. But this help came, and it was a spiritual help. And that unfolding is really why I wrote that book, A Thousand Screaming Monkeys, was to tell this story of how God worked in my life. Right. Of how spirit came in and intervened where I couldn't. There's this saying around recovery, if you go around, you'll hear people say, God did for me what I could not do for myself. And that's helped me to change my consciousness about the world.
Right, right.
So, and ever since that first time where I had that little tiny seed that maybe it's possible to live a different life, then I started to implement different thoughts.
Right.
And writing and journaling was huge. I started at that treatment center where, the life in the rearview mirror was complete desolation and destruction. And the life ahead was unknown. And I don't know which is worse.
Right.
Because a life that I don't know, I've heard guys, I go and do work in the jails with recovery, and I've heard guys say, I just want to go back inside because I know what's going to happen. I know when breakfast is. I know when I'm going to get let out. I know when yard time is. And I know that I'm going to be okay. On the streets, they said, it's an for sure thing.
Exactly.
And so to look at the unknown, it's too much.
Right.
Especially, there's, I learned this too, our egos. A lot of people think the ego is just loftiness and holier than thou. But the other side of ego is inadequate, inferior, not good enough. And that one of the main components that held me stuck was feeling inadequate, but feeling like I had to put on the front that says that I'm all that, right, and that I can do this and that I don't ever give up. And where I learned that, I don't know, because the surrendering of that function of my consciousness allowed me to step into my new life. So, I could tell you a whole bunch of terrorizing stories about addiction and alcoholism and my own experience as an addict, but it would take far too long for this show. And so
and you've written the book, and I've read your book, as you know, and if people want to know an in-depth, really look into your journey, I strongly recommend that they get your book, or if they're a relative of someone who's experiencing addiction, because reading your book really does give that inside look. And as you know, and I don't know how many of my viewers know, but I was a drug counselor for numerous years. Yes. And I worked with people who had drug addictions, and I have been inside a jail to visit them like you do now. And it's a whole other world. But your book really does give people a great snapshot of that. So I do recommend that. So let's talk now. Let's kind of shift. And you've been sharing some kind of what woke you up or what helped you in your journey. But let's think that maybe someone is watching this who does have an addiction of some kind. And, it doesn't have to be an illegal substance. It can be alcohol, it can be drugs, it can be sugar, it can be television, it can be pornography. I mean, people are addicted to a lot of different things. So can you share some of, or if it's a family member who wants to help someone, what are some ideas that you could share with people that could help them maybe take that first step?
Well, that's a great question, and it's very involved.
I know, yes. I know, way beyond our show, but enough to help people kind of, get a little something that they could maybe use.
Well, this subject is what my life's work has become about. It's the culmination of everything that I've learned in 38 years of addiction, and then in the 10 years that I've had in recovery and really living a life that's centered in God. That I've learned this weird thing about human beings, and that is that we have a soul's calling. And there's this saying that says, all are called, but few listen. Few will ever answer the deeper calling of the soul, but all have the capability. And I think that right now our earth is waking up as a species, as the age of the earth itself and all living beings. Right now we're at a time that people more than ever are hearing the call. And it's agonizing because when we hear the call, it's a call to action. And if we don't take the action, we will squander our soul's calling, which is okay. But there's a price. And so there's what makes me not answer my soul's calling, I learned from myself, and maybe the viewers can relate, is that my story is too strong.
What do you mean?
The container of my consciousness is too strong. Because what I learned is for 38 years, I practiced my story. I practiced all of the things that I believed to be true about my story. And like Swami Sri Yukteswar taught, the truth is the truth. Doesn't matter what you believe. I can believe my story and live my entire life in my story, never even knowing the truth of my soul.
Right.
And so that's what I'm coming into now is this deep awareness that as I reach out to another suffering addict, I get to find my soul's calling. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to go out and save the world. You know, it's like Henry David Thoreau said in his little book, I think it was Walden, he said, if I knew somebody was coming to my house to do me good, I'd run for the hills.
That's right. Don't do me good that way. That's right.
Yeah, it's like, I'm going to save you. It's like, that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is there's, like we talk about, people are falling off left and right in addiction, dying, going to hospitals, going to treatment centers and detoxes and jails and prisons. But there's just as many that are trying to wake up. And inevitably, when you make yourself available, they'll come on the path. I mean, they'll come on your path and they'll say, will you please help me? And you'll be in a position to say, yes, I will.
So is the first step to, first of all, admit that you need some help and then reach out in some way?
Absolutely. And I was kind of trying to get around to your question and answer it as concisely as I could. But I believe that when we have an addicted person in the family, because I've learned that alcoholism, addiction is absolutely a family disease.
Right.
Does that mean that mom and dad and daughter and son are addicted? No. It means that there's a function in the consciousness that is causing addiction in the family to be present. So what can we do? Well, what we can do is answer our soul's calling. If I'm a dad, not an addict, and I have a son or a daughter who's addicted, and I want to help that person, if I go to them and tell them what they need to do, yet I'm living my life not in my full soul's expression and I'm suffering and they can smell it, because addicts have 1,001 antennas. We are intuitive and we know that what you're saying does not match what you really are inside.
Right.
You know, it was Wayne Dyer that said, we manifest not what we want, we manifest what we are.
Exactly.
So maybe we're living a life that we just don't like, and then we're going to go to our child and say, here's what you need to do. I'm not going to listen to that.
Right.
So when instead we say, I'm going to answer the deeper calling in my being, and right now, I'm sorry, I can't help you. That's when the addict wakes up and goes, what? That story is actually in my book. My mom, all the stuff she did for me in the world, the greatest thing that she did for me was when I came home from the treatment center. And I did not know that the story I was telling myself, which was I'm never going to use again, and I found God and I'm the spiritual master now after 31 days sober, after a whole life of addiction, and I'm just going to get my stuff together. And I come home and I knock and I said, Mom, I'm here. Where's the cake and the candle? And she said to me with just a disgusted look, she said, what are you doing here? You're not welcome here. And she let me grab my few things and she said, you can't stay here. And I know now how hard that was for her.
Right. Right.
But I held my head up high, my arrogant little chin, and I said, okay, I'll get it together. When I left her house with my few belongings in the car, I knew I was going to get loaded. But instead of getting loaded, I called somebody who was in recovery, and that changed my life, that one phone call.
Right.
But she stood up for herself in a way that she had never done before.
Right. And
that changed me. Sure. And that's the answer moms don't like to hear from me when they say, can I do? And I say, you can cut them loose.
Right. Right.
They say, oh.
I know.
But and I'll say that with this caveat, is that my mom and my brother, who came to me that day and thought I was going to die, my brother paid for my treatment because I couldn't. And my mom got me there. And my sister got me there. And my family got me there, even though they said, you can't come around, because they were afraid of me.
Right.
So there's a way that we can help them, but stand in our own truth of who we are.
Exactly. You can do both. Exactly. Yeah. Nobody's saying to be cruel to the person, but it is that importance of standing up for what's right and not continuing to enable and, keep that system going, because everybody, like you're pointing out, and it's not just family. It can be your boss. It can be a wife, whomever. You are in a system. We're all in systems, and it's about what do you need to do to shift the system, and whether you can't just blame the addict. Everybody has their part to play in it. And everybody has to take ownership of that and figure out, well, what do I need to do to break free of the system and to break the system open? And that's part of what your mom and your brother and your family did for you. And then you had to do your part. Yeah.
And quite honestly, I believe that that's the addict's part also, because for me, what happened is I finally said, whoa, that was a wake-up call. And then I got into recovery. And what do we do in recovery? Well, we take a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves.
Right.
And that is no small undertaking. Right. And there's a lot of delusion.
Yep.
And rarely does the first searching and fearless moral inventory bear the depth
Right.
of really taking a good look. And some people say it's not necessary to take a deep look. For me, it just was. And it was because I got to see what was really running the show.
Mm-hmm.
And when I cleared that stuff away, when I say I cleared it away, what I actually did is I handed it over to Spirit. I said, please take this. I can't deal with this.
Right.
And Spirit said, no problem.
Right.
It's always no problem with Spirit. And so all that stuff was removed. Well, I say all, but there's always some left,
Layers,
right?
layers. Yeah, it's an onion. You peel off the layers, you keep peeling and peeling. Yes.
But as the layers peel off, more and more discernible is the call of your soul's calling,
Mm-hmm.
and you can start to hear it, and then you move in the direction of it. And all of a sudden, like in my life today, I'm finding myself doing things I have never done.
Mm-hmm.
I got to become a yoga teacher, and that was something that wasn't even on the radar when I was using.
Right.
And then I get sober within a couple of years. I'm practicing, and then all of a sudden I'm teaching because I love it. But what I'm not even teaching. I'm really learning.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I get to be with another sacred circle of people that want to learn more about what we're really doing on Earth.
Right. Yeah, you give talks, and I know you talk at Unity of Everett sometimes. I know you told me yesterday, hopefully I can share this, you're studying to be a Unity minister and all kinds of things that, like you say, and you got your real estate license, and, there's all these things, like you say, you never would have even dreamt of them. And when you're in the midst of an addiction, I don't think, at first you can't see all of that possibility. It's taking that first little step. And I think that's important to say out to people too. It's like, you start with baby steps, take a little step. It doesn't have to be huge all at one time. Take a little step, and then each step opens it to another step and another step. And like you, then eventually you go, wow, look where I am now. But it was all a bunch of little steps.
Oh, absolutely. And the first step, I think, is the most important. That first step of admission, in the 12 steps, it's that we admitted we were powerless over our addiction, mm-hmm. and that our life was unmanageable.
Right.
And so for me, I could fully see, I admitted to myself for a long time that I knew I was an alcoholic and a drug addict, but I didn't care because that's just what I did to survive. Mm-hmm. And my life was unmanageable only when I didn't have drugs. And so when I finally come to the 12 steps as a way of life, I could see that I'm truly powerless over my addiction. And my life was unmanageable. Took me about 4 years to really realize that I'd been pretending like I was adhering to that principle, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. but that I was actually managing my own life in a way of my smaller self, and mm-hmm. still dysfunctional in many ways.
Right.
So it takes, I'm glad you brought that up because it does take a while. But the first step is really what I call a sincere inquiry. Mm-hmm. We just say, I can't do this. Please help me.
Right.
That's really it.
Right. Which is hard for people to do. That's the other piece is, I think if they're listening to us or somebody's watching us, it's like we're saying it so glibly that it could kind of be like, oh yeah, you just, you admit it. It's not, we recognize it's not an easy thing to do, but yes. It is a necessary thing to do. And I think once you do it the first time, that then opens that door, and you may have to do it more than once. Well, you do have to do it more than once. But that first step of doing it, yes, it can be difficult. And maybe you don't have to wait until you're thrown in jail, or people who get DUIs or whatever, maybe you don't have to let it get that far to be that wake-up call, or maybe you do. Again, no judgment. Some of us are more hard-headed. I can be real hard-headed.
Yeah. Well, it brings up an interesting couple of points because I don't believe that you have to be fully addicted in a low-bottom addiction to find this thing.
I agree. Right.
We call surrender. But what I learned for myself, and maybe people can relate, is that true power, the real power of the universe. I mean, if you look at how all the earth works and the universe and the cosmos, it's extremely powerful. But I try to run my life from this little tiny power center in my thinking mind, and I can never quite live up to that in my external world because of my story, because my story is too small. Mm-hmm. Usually rooted in inadequacy. There's all these places where I'm never going to be enough, right, or I'm too good. And so I try to manifest my world, and it's like this little tiny cipher. Mm-hmm. But when I realize that true power doesn't come from me here, it comes through.
Right.
And we start to open up to what I call spirit, the flow of the universe. We actually tap into what gives all of life. Right. And that power manifests so easily that I almost feel like I'm cheating these days because I've got this beautiful life that I love. And so going back to where we were just a few minutes ago, the newcomer, somebody first coming and thinking just like I used to, there's no way I can ever just not use, just not get loaded. There's no way, because I need it to get to a place where you're actually living in that kind of a flow. But it really is little tiny steps, one after the other, but a daily renewal of that commitment.
And
because we only... Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it's a changing of your identity, and that takes time, because you move from I am a fill in the blank, whatever it is, to I am, instead of I am an addict, I am self-fulfilled. I am living my life purpose, whatever that is for each person. But it's realizing you are, in fact, changing your identity. And that takes work. It takes time. It takes effort. It takes being willing to do it. Now, once you're done, I think then it feels like it was magical. But you and I both know there's no magic to it. It's really doing the work and taking the baby steps so that you can change your identity.
Yes, and I'll add two things there. One is when you said it's what we change our identity, we also change what we identify with.
Yes.
As who and what we are.
True, yes.
And then the other thing is that, I lost it.
That's okay.
It was two things.
I don't remember what I said either. I was in the moment. But I'm sure it was brilliant, and we'll watch this and we'll go, oh yeah, that's what she said.
But it's good stuff, and that's what it was. It came back. This is why sometimes I've said in the past, and I honestly believe this, when I see a new person come in to a recovery circle and they're just suffering and they're just in this terrible place, and they get that they can identify with something else and they allow that power to flow through for even an instant, it's always a wow, oh my God, can you believe what happened? They share their story. They're so enlivened. And like when you said we get glib about it, we're like, oh yeah, I just surrendered. Yeah, well, that was 10 years ago.
Right.
Even though I do it every day, in the beginning, that's why I wrote my book. In the beginning, it was so awesome to get into the flow and watch the synchronicity of spirit move in every single thing.
Right. Today,
I'm constantly getting stories when I talk to people of each encounter that I had. It gets more and more divine as I move along. That the synchronicity is profound. So to watch that happen in a new person, it is so beautiful to feel in your heart, to see another human being get that they can tap into universal love and live it.
Right. It's awesome. Well, we're come to the end of our time, Kevin. So what I'd like you to do is share your website. If people want to get in touch with you, if they want to sign up, do you have an email list? Just kind of for anybody that wants to follow through with you, how can they do that?
Well, I got my book here,
yes.
1,000 Screaming Monkeys, and it's my journey through alcoholism and addiction. And on the back of it is my website, and it's right down here at the bottom. And it's Merkabah Press, and that's spelled Merkabah, Press, PRESS.com. And you can get on my mailing list there. You can contact me there. And you can also do it through Amazon. If you just search for my book, 1,000 Screaming Monkeys, you can find a link to my website.
Awesome. Thank you so much for stopping by. I really appreciate the time you spent, and you've said some wonderful things. And I look forward to rewatching this and hearing everything you said. So thank you very much, Kevin. Take care.
Thank you so much, Krysta. I really appreciate it.
Okay. What great information Kevin shared with us. I so appreciate him being here. And I just wanted to share with you just some additional thoughts that if you are addicted to something, first of all, I'd like to say don't feel guilty about it. That's not going to help at all. If you're addicted to something, your soul is calling out. There's a reason why you're addicted. And being guilty about it or feeling that you're bad or unworthy is not going to help. So let go of that. Admit the addiction, and then decide to reach out for help in whatever works for you. Maybe there's a counselor, maybe there's a minister. Get in touch with Kevin. Maybe there's a group you could go to. But reach out in some way and start taking those baby steps that'll get you started in the direction you want to go. Your addiction is part of your life path. It's where you are. Use it as a tool. Use it to grow. And you might want to check out my book, Anything is Possible. It's my memoir, but there's an entire section in there where I do talk about my experiences working in some drug clinics, and there's some fun stories there, as well as kind of my viewpoint of addictions, which is, they're there for a reason. Use them, grow from them. Thank you for being here, and remember, keep it real.